Hello everybody and welcome to ChessDiagnostic. Today we're going to look at 3 different positions where the opponent blundered, and I'm going to show you how to prevent blunders in your own games because it seems like everything is getting banned these days, so I figured why not ban blunders, which is, on my channel at least, a very important topic. So I'm going to go over 3 historical positions. The first one here is Vladimir Kramnik versus Deep Fritz. So Fritz is a computer program and it was playing white, and we'll see what happens here. And of course, Vladimir Kramnik is a super grandmaster world champion, but he makes a rather simple blunder, and we'll analyze why. In this position, we have Kramnik playing as black, and he just decides to go with a4, trying to push his pawns down and promote a pawn. Now, the reason he blunders is because he gets so caught up in his own idea, he doesn't see white's threats. So after knight takes, obviously threatening the rook, although it allows bishop takes, which he does, and then he takes the rook, rook. Now, what do you think we should play here? As you can see, white is threatening a mate in 1, which Kramnik missed. Now, the first thing I want to cover is that when you are done with deciding your move, what you want to do is you want to think about all the checks, captures, and threats that your opponent has, and you want to see what they could do after you make your move. So in this situation, Kramnik plays queen to e3. That doesn't really stop the threat here of queen to h7 checkmate, which ended the game. So of course black had multiple options. He could have played here, he could have just moved the king over, which if he did that, then check doesn't result in checkmate because he can either move here or preferably just take the knight. And so you can see that the first thing to prevent blunders is you want to pay attention to your opponent's ideas. Now, it's very hard to do that in a practical game, especially when you're in time trouble, but always think, or at least do a mental checklist. Say, okay, for example, let's go to the position here. Okay, I want to play queen to e3. What could my opponent do? What checks, captures, and threats? You'd immediately see queen to h7. All right, let's move on to the next position. Here we have a miniature game that was played in 1936 between Frederick Baldwin Arnold and Milton Loeb Hanauer. And it's rather a short game because white decides to blunder early on. So let's see what happens. We start with d4, knight to f6, c4, and then black decides to make things complicated from the get-go with e5. White decides not to take, but black makes the right decision using this open square now of playing bishop to c5. Now, white makes a blunder right away with bishop to g5. It looks like he's developing a piece, but he forgot to calculate the forcing scenarios of his opponent, which we reviewed in the first game. So let's see how to prevent that. What's the reason behind bishop to g5 being a blunder? Well, if you can see immediately that bishop takes, and then there's a knight fork either here or here, and there's no white square to capture it, so he'd automatically win this undefended bishop. So you should see that right away. Black actually makes the correct move and plays bishop or knight to e4, which actually doesn't present him too many options. It does allow white the opportunity to come back, but instead white takes, making another blunder after a blunder, which is another key component. A lot of times when you make one blunder, you need to make sure not to let that disruption in your mind lead you into the second blunder. And the second blunder led to checkmate. Bishop takes f2, checkmate. So let's go back a little bit. So if white decided, okay, I made a blunder, I need to come back, it's not the best, but after bishop takes, pawn takes, and queen check, he's still surviving, although it's pretty brutal, I'd say. So even at this point, knight takes. He can't take here because he'd win the rook, and there's really no good option at this point. So he is still lost. He's still lost a ton of material, but at least he's not getting mated in what, 7, well, I guess 5 moves even. So, all right, so let's go back here. Black also had the option of playing bishop takes f2 check right away, king takes, and now I'd like you to calculate whether he should play knight to e4 check or knight to g4 check. This is an important position to study because you can see that when you have these very simple kind of blunder positions in the opening, a lot of times you'll make a move that seems great, but actually it leads to equality, and I've done this quite a bit. So if, for example, if you play knight to e4 check, if that's what you chose, if we see something like king to e3, and now the knight has to take, because if he plays queen check, then the king can take, although it's still precarious for white. Materially, it's about equal. Now, if the knight takes, you should see that h4 actually gets the piece back, because there's no square for the knight to run to. So the correct move in this position would have been knight to g4, and now if the king comes here, then it's very precarious in addition to being materially up by black. So this is a simple miniature position, and you'll see a lot of positions from the beginning where your opponent complicates it, and you just need to look at possible checks, captures, and threats, paying attention to your opponent's idea, but also not allowing a blunder to lead into another blunder. So that's another lesson I want you to take from this video. All right, we're going to go to the final position between Tigran, Petrosian, and Bronstein. So this position is starting a few moves before the final position, and it's actually, I think, white to move, and it's black who wins in this position. It's a very complicated position. There's a lot of piece contact. We still have 3 minor pieces, 2 rooks, and 2 queens on the board. So obviously white is trying to pressure on this weak or somewhat weak b pawn, but after knight moves forward, the queen comes in, and then we see a simple move, knight back. Now the final lesson is you always want to ask the specific idea of your opponent's last move. Now this will prevent a lot of blunders, and I know it's related to just understanding your opponent's idea, but a lot of times your opponent will see something and they'll say, oh, I can just make a simple threat. I can threaten checkmate. And if he just misses it, then I get a checkmate. And that's exactly what happened here with Bronstein, who was, I think, a world top 10 player at the time, versus Tigran Petrosian in 1956. He plays simply knight to g5. So he was paying attention to his own ideas while not seeing that knight to f5 was actually threatening his queen, and the game was over. So that could have been prevented if he said, well, why did the knight move back? Well, he moved his queen forward, now he's hitting your knight, or he's hitting your queen with his knight. So just be careful, and let's try to ban blunders from here on out and make the right moves by paying attention to your opponent's ideas, looking at all the checks, captures, and threats, and doing that at the end of deciding your next move in the game. Now, I know a lot of you play Blitz here online, and it's kind of a blunder fest when you play Blitz, but it's good to always go back to the game that you played. Even if you play the game, stop the game and go over the past 5 games that you played online, even if they were 1-minute games, and see where could I have asked the questions that I posed in this video, and would that have prevented the blunder I made? A lot of times it's not necessarily that you don't know the tactical position or you don't know the knowledge behind a move, it's that you just simply didn't ask the questions of what you already know. So I hope that helps. Just a quick update on this channel. I'm going to be back posting videos. I know I've been away for a while, but now I kind of have everything set up here, and I have a lot of ideas that I've been writing in the past 3 months about what to do. Obviously, I hope everyone's okay with all this stuff, and let's just get back to it and have fun. All right, I'll see you in the future. The internet is my best friend.